Hi, Chase. Welcome back to the podcast.
It is great to be back. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and thanks for wearing your special shirt that you talked about the last time you were on the podcast. We appreciate that.
Just for y'all. Dropkick.
All right, let's jump right in with Readers Theater. If I'm a teacher who has never heard of Readers Theater ever, I've never done it with my class, can you just give us a brief overview of what it is and what are the steps that I would need to take in my classroom to implement it?
Sure. The beauty of Readers Theater is it's very easy and very effective. So the easiest way to describe it is just groups of kids dramatically reading a text and performing it. And the key is they need a structured practice in order to achieve mastery and read with fluency and be able to entertain their audiences. So basically, you got kids doing a play, but not really a play. They don't dress up. There's no props. They don't memorize their lines. The only thing that they're entertaining the audience with is their awesome voices.
So reminds me of Pitch Perfect, but we won't take that sidebar in this conversation.
Okay. All right. Yeah, we don't have the time.
I love that. I love that as a teacher, we get a bang for our buck right away with this. You said it's very effective. I know we're going to talk about that in a little bit, but it's just so unusual that in education we would get a really quick bang for our buck. So do you have any tips for how to make it successful? I'm thinking timelines.
Yes.
Like what should I be thinking about if I'm wanting to implement this in my classroom?
Okay, good. So to start off with, depending on your grade level, you have to think about those things, the context of your classroom, what your students like as far as the scripts you're going to select. So let's just break it down like this. We typically use like a 5-day format. So on Monday in preparation, we go through, and find some scripts. Thebestclass.org is my site where you can get couple hundred of those. And what you do is you just kind of look and say, what would my students like? And you pick enough scripts to match the number of students in your class. So that way you're not all doing one script, you have small groups. It's like a small group, whole group activity, which is awesome because you are then free to work with those small groups throughout the week. So on Monday, you have your scripts, you introduce them, and the kids raise your hand to say, yep, that's the one I want to be in. And that's how the groups are formed. It's essentially based on interest and in some cases based on who wants to be with who. Whatever, who cares? As long as they're excited to do it, let them, let them pair off in friendship. So then on that Monday, they take it home and they think about who they want to be. And really, it's about understanding the whole text itself, like getting an overall feel for it, the meaning, that kind of thing. And the next day they come in on Tuesday and they sit with their groups and they select their parts. So they pick their parts, they don't get what they want and they cry. And you give them a hug and tell them it's going to be okay. And you do some rock, paper, scissors and you figure it all out. Now, the first week is a little rough because it's new to them. But the beautiful part is, as they learn this framework, they get in that routine. So the only thing that changes are the scripts, which is great. So they learn this routine and they realize that they don't always get what they want, and that's just life. So on that Tuesday, once they select their parts, they focus on decoding and word recognition. So they look at their own part and they just attempt to read it. Maybe circle or underline words they don't know that they can work with the teacher on, and you kind of have to work them through that to build their automaticity. So we don't want them focusing on expression or anything else. It's like, let's learn how to read these words, okay? And that may take a while. It may take some one-on-one work. It may take small group work at some other time. Maybe help at home. But then hopefully by Wednesday, they at least know the words. So on Wednesday is when we start focusing on this automaticity and introduction to prosody. So the expressive part of it. So that and Expression is fun is because you are thinking about the meaning of the text. How am I supposed to read this? What is the author's message? What are they trying to convey? So they truly have to have a good understanding, and it's an indicator that they're comprehending if they're reading out loud with good expression. So you're coaching them using terms like, hey, what if we read it like this? And then eventually your students start to coach each other because they hear that so often. So they're like, hey, maybe we should read it like this. Hey, I think he's really angry. Let's do this super angry voice or whatever. And so they work with each other. They work with you on Wednesday to get that expression going. And then on Thursday, essentially, is a practice performance where they stand up and you're listening and making sure everyone's going to be successful, because that's really the key. The key about Reader's Theater is we want to make sure that they are going to stand up there and be awesome, because this is a confidence building. And not only the skills that they're learning and developing, but it also builds confidence because they get to read aloud with prosody and like a good reader. And some of these kids have never done that before. And that's what's wonderful about giving them support and practice throughout the week so that they then can be awesome when we come to Friday, which is the grand performance. That's when you invite everybody to come watch these thespians show off their reading skills. And or you can take it on the road. You go bust down classroom doors. It's like, we're here to do Reader's Theater. And, they can't say no after you come in with that kind of enthusiasm.
That's right. I'm thinking like just bombarding the front office, like your whole class going in and being like, we are doing the script today.
Yes. We have actually stood there was like a little step in front of the library that went along right to the front doors. And we stood and we performed for people walking in. And that was just great too.
That's cool.
And the front office is also amazing because they're always there. There's always somebody there if you can't find the audience. It's really fun to plan these for walkthroughs, like for when you're administrators, because honestly, you're just sitting in the back and all your kids sound great. And they're having a good time, and you clearly have done the work throughout the week so that then you could just celebrate all that they learned. So that's kind of a basic Monday through Friday framework.
Yeah.
With a couple of things in between, it's really good to send them home with their scripts so they can practice with somebody.
Yeah.
And big tip number one is make extra copies because they won't bring them back.
Good tip.
You can either be really mad and frustrated every single day when they don't, or you can just be like, go to the folder.
Go to the extras bin. That's what I called it.
The
extras bin.
I have more texts at home now bin, right? It's like more things to read at home. That's lovely.
Chase, do you always recommend the performance being for other people? I'm just thinking like logistically as a teacher, I might feel like, oh, that feels like a lot of work.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the reasons we have small groups is so they then can perform for each other at the end of the week. So that can just be an internal thing. For a couple of years, I just had a standing invitation to parents at 10 o'clock. We always did our Reader's Theater on Friday, and they could come if they wanted to. So
I love that. That's such a great way to invite parents and caregivers into your classroom in a way that feels authentic and meaningful and also not overwhelming. Like I don't have to come and stay for 2 hours for coming to stay minutes. For 20 minutes. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And, parents, they want to help. They think they don't know how, and how can I get involved in the school? And you're right. That's that's low hanging fruit right there. Show up, sit in a chair, listen to your kid and go home.
Yeah. That's what I was wondering too, as you were talking and talking about this Monday through Friday kind of procedural drill or routine to work through Reader's Theater. Are you thinking 10, 20 minutes a day? Like how long should this take? I know you mentioned there might be other times where you might be pulling a small group and supporting. So of course it's going to be fluid, but just kind of for our listeners thinking, I don't know, Chase, how long does this take each day?
Sure. As you get into that routine and it becomes really well-oiled machine, it really depends on the length of the scripts that you choose. But typically it's about 5 minutes a day.
Wow.
And I know 5 minutes because I always set the timer for 5 minutes, said read it, rehearse it as many times as you can within 5 minutes, because scripts are going to be different in length. They'll finish at different times. They'll annoy you with, what do I do now? Instead, it's, set the time and here it goes. Now, if your scripts are a little bit longer, maybe you need 7, 8 minutes. It just really kind of depends. And a lot of teachers don't want to do readers theater because the length of the scripts, and then you got to sit, you got to listen, and they have to go over this. Well, here's a tip. Don't pick long scripts. Just don't do it.
Good tip.
Despised long strips. As a readers theater advocate and researcher for over a decade, I didn't like them. I like the shorter ones, the funny ones, the ones that had like a little twist, that just really was for entertaining audiences. Scary stories. I mean, things that were not just like, hey, let's take the Three Little Pigs, for example, and that's nice and that's lovely. That just wasn't my style. I have it on my script or on my site, and you can certainly download and use it. But I loved the ones where the kids couldn't wait for the audience to hear them, right? Like the ones where it's just like that have like that weird twist at the end that's going to surprise everybody, or somebody's going to yell at the end, boo, or whatever. Like things where they're just like so antsy that they cannot. Their very existence is just to perform every Friday. And so creating that kind of a culture and getting them that far engaged is really going to be up to you, the teacher out there, and your students. It's every year is different, I mean, I remember one year I only had 2 girls in my class.
Oh gosh.
There were a lot of scripts about gas.
I understand that. I have a 5-year-old boy.
Yeah. So the true story of farts is actually on my website too. It's nonfiction.
I did see that when we were perusing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
PU is
it's
you Birdie is
nonfiction.
another good one. Yeah. And it is nonfiction. It's pretty good. Now PU is that you Birdie, that is fiction.
Okay. Noted.
Noted. Working on our genres.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, it's usually I wouldn't say any more than 10 minutes ever. Now on performance day, depending on the number of groups and the length again, sometimes the performances took like 15 minutes. Another thing I recommend as far as finding an audience is just pairing up with that awesome teacher friend that you want to talk to on Fridays all the time and just performing for each other while you sit in the back and figure out where you're going to go for happy hour.
I love that.
That's the way to do it. I'm curious too, you mentioned about like getting the routines down a few times there. So I just want to confirm that this is not something you would do like as a one-time special. We're just doing this for fun this week kind of thing.
Right.
But it sounds like this is something you would do regularly.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
And when we get into the research, we can look at that too. But I will tell you that I don't know of a study out there that was less than 6 weeks long. So it was about a month and a half. Most of the studies I did were either a year or at least a semester, 18 weeks. Yeah. So yeah, if you just want to perform one on Halloween, don't expect some of the results that we're going to be talking about.
Right.
That's awesome to know and really helpful. Although your site does have some really fun, like I know you have a fun Valentine's script, things like that. Mm-hmm. So I think that those are opportunities, right, to continue what you've already built.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, those routines.
There's another site. I don't know if you guys follow Aaron Grossman. He's a teacher out in Reno.
Oh, someone just put that on our.
Is it the 2 teachers
Facebook group?
Yeah, just 2 teachers.
I have it in my phone.
Well, you got balloons.
I know. I'm so excited about it. I have it in my phone because I was so impressed with it. It's called just2teachers.com.
Yeah. So his reader scripts are mainly about content. He has math, social studies, science, all of that. So mine are more about make you laugh and, classics. And his site is really cool because you're learning things along the way. Yeah. I mean, besides the true story of farts, there's
always a time to learn about that. Please don't put yourself down there, Chase.
Don't skip that one over. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so check those out. That's a wonderful way to integrate. And I mean, doing a script on the digestive system. I mean, come on. I know what part I'd want to be.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, also, I'm just thinking, in science class, you're going to learn about, hopefully, the body systems. It's a perfect place to either extend or build different knowledge, right?
And make it fun.
Make it fun. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't
Mm-hmm.
think this has to be limited to ELA class.
Oh, absolutely not.
And we can integrate so much, right? We can integrate vocabulary and word meanings and word parts and sentence structure and so much more.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And when you start looking at frameworks for Reader's Theater, we do have another one that we called RT Plus, which actually has word study and vocabulary and reading comprehension stuff. Of course, that's making Reader's Theater like a focal point in your classroom, So that is then extending the time that you're going to devote to it. Now, obviously, you'll be having like vocabulary instruction and different things. So it's covering the full gamut, but it is kind of centers around those scripts. So we do have that. That article came out in 2017 in the Reading Teacher, and essentially it has the same fluency goals, but then it also has things you can do for vocabulary, and then things you can do for making meaning each day as well.
And that's called Reader's Theater Plus.
Yeah, the article was Reader's Theater plus word study and comprehension.
Cool. We'll link all of these in the show notes. If you're listening and you're overwhelmed, you're driving, you don't have a pen, don't worry. We got you in the show notes.
Yeah, please don't be writing things down while you're driving. Silence. What happened?
We can cut this part out.
Okay.
Do you want to jump in with the next part, Lori?
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. We'll do a pause and then we'll jump back in. Okay, so we really want to kind of extend and dig into just exactly what you just said, Chase, right? Like thinking about those other parts of literacy. And we know that you have a ton of free scripts on your website, like you said, as well as other cool resources that we just mentioned. So Melissa, I'm going to hand it to you now.
Yeah, so we picked one of your scripts was Rumpelstiltskin. We figured that the audience would know that. It's a pretty well-known fairy tale. And we're going to just share some specific parts. Lori's going to read the part. I'm going to pick out some things that we thought, vocabulary or some syntax that we thought would be particularly tricky for kids that we might stop and talk about with students. And then you can just react to it and tell us if we're on the right track. How's that sound?
Okay, that sounds good. I will be judgy.
Cool.
Excellent.
Be judgy. Love that. All right. So here is example 1 from the script Rumpelstiltskin. Narrator 1. Once there was a miller who was poor, but who had a beautiful daughter. Now it happened that he had to go and speak to the king, and in order to make himself appear important, he said to the king.
All right. So we were thinking of vocabulary and morphology here. And we legitimately, I would say not we struggled, but we went back and forth with, I don't know, would we stop here? Would we not? But we picked out the word miller just because the whole text was about the miller or the miller's daughter, right? So you see that word over and over and over again. And we don't think kids know what a miller is. Most kids probably don't know what it is. But we did think they could tap into some of their morphology, just knowing that ER at the end often does mean someone that does something, right? So, okay, it gives them a clue. But we probably would still need to give them a little help with, well, what is a mill? What what does it mean for someone to do that? So we were thinking like maybe even showing them a picture of a mill so they could understand kind of what happens, that it's this big machine that grinds grain into flour, so they could kind of get a picture of, okay, this is what that person does. They operate this machine. But then we also said, like, it's not so essential to the story for them to understand it, but
Right.
it also is just repeated over and over that they might just feel better knowing what it is. So we'd love to hear what
all we need to know is he has a job, right? He's not unemployed.
He has a job. He's someone that does something.
Yeah, he does something. He mills.
He mills. Exactly.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. I mean, any opportunity, if you are going to extend with these scripts, that absolutely. I mean, you can look at your own scope and sequence. You can see how it aligns. You can look at your content areas, all of that to kind of, community. If you're studying the community or whatever, hundreds of years ago, you had to have your miller, right? I mean,
Right.
who could go on without the miller? So no, I think it's a great idea to just show them these aren't just scripts, these are texts, and we can use them for instructional purposes. We already have them selected. They're already engaged with them. and to know more and think deeper about them, I think is really the lovely side effect of spending time in text for a week. But the nice
Yeah,
part
that's
is
actually a really good point. That's a good point. You're diving into it for 5 days. And even if you're spending 5 to 7 minutes actually reading it, you could be extending it during other times, which then you get an even bigger bang for your buck.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. I couldn't agree more, because and what I encourage teachers to just go ahead and start basic, start with that baby framework where you just, hey, let's learn the words. Let's learn how to read this expressively. We'll spend a small amount of time because, you're going to be trial and error with different scripts and how, and introducing your kids to, because, the first week you got some introverts, not
Yeah, that's what I was
everybody's like
thinking.
us. And and you kind of, it takes them a minute, I every year I started with a few introverts, and I apologize for this, but they weren't anymore by the end. They were but that first week, it they may not want to participate, and I give them that option. It's like, okay, well, if you'd rather just read independently or whatever, I can find you a text that you could read during this time. Every year a couple would start that way, but by the second week they were all in. They had a
Yeah.
blast. They were having fun. And again, when it comes back to you're picking things for their interest, they're also integrating it in other ways. They're being successful. It's motivating. I mean, so there you go.
And
Yeah.
I would imagine, like, if back to our example about the Miller, if they're reading it over and over and over again, and they're reading Miller and Miller and Miller and Miller, I am sure you're going to have at least one kid who says, "What's a Miller?"
What is a Miller? Absolutely.
And there's your opportunity, right?
Has got to have that kid that asks about everything.
Everything.
And which is great. Love the curiosity, but sometimes it's a little overwhelming. But yeah, absolutely. They're going to be asking, like, what in the world is a Miller? And who, they may think it's like a last name or something.
Right.
That may
Oh,
be,
yeah, that's
like,
a good
okay,
point.
this is just a person. But yeah, if you're working on that morphology of ER or whatever, that's a perfect time. Like, I'm a teacher. This is a Miller. Here's a mill. This is how it mills. And I think that's pretty much it.
That's it.
Yeah.
I love some of the research coming out in small group instruction where they're saying less is better. And that right there is a 30-second lesson.
Right.
Yes, that gives so much background knowledge, and also knowledge that can be applied forward, right? The ER at the end, a teacher, someone who teaches, Miller, someone who mills. Great. Go on. And then they're going to start asking questions. Oh, I noticed this, I'm thinking of the word like proctor. Okay, someone who, I don't know how to explain it. Someone who proctors a test. That doesn't work. No. We got to think of another one.
Good example, Lori.
We got to think of another one. Hold on, we'll think of.
My son always talks about plumber.
Plumber.
Plums, which I still
That
don't know if
doesn't
that
work.
works either. Like, what does it mean to plumb?
But I hope the kids have these discussions. This is what we want, right? Like on the fly, I'm not coming up with it well, but
Baker. Is a baker a good one?
Good thing we're not
Right, there you go.
we're
A
not
baker,
too embarrassed
some
on this
baker.
podcast. We don't get embarrassed.
A driver, someone that
A driver,
drives.
someone who drives. But it doesn't work for everything. But maybe it does if you look at the meaning of the morphology. So then you can extend that, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's great to, especially if you choose these scripts like that have these incredible vocabulary. I mean, especially when you're getting shorter ones, you can make them more challenging. That's another thing about Reader's Theater you guys want to think about is choose challenging text.
Yeah.
If we're going to spend a week on this,
Right.
we choose something difficult, and ideally something at grade level, so that those kids who get the support for the first time in their lives stand up and read something aloud on grade level. And that's a wonderful way for, to meet that grade level expectation that we want them in text that are grade level text. We want them in that. And this is one of the ways that you can get them there.
Mm-hmm. And the scaffold too is the part of the scaffold is the repetition. Part of the scaffold is like making sure that you're like talking about it, they're understanding the parts so that they are fluently reading and having that expression to show the comprehension. But the repetition is a huge scaffold here. And we don't want to miss that opportunity with not supplying grade level text. Like that's so important.
And I'll tell you, and if you've ever done Reader's Theater, listeners out there, and listen, Lori, your striving readers, those that find reading out loud difficult, those that find reading in general difficult, will pick the biggest parts. Every time. They want to be narrator one, they want to be Lysander, they want to be the wolf, they want to be all of these things. And it's truly because they know that they're going to get the support they need. Right. And then they can
They'll be
prove
ready
to the other students that I am a great reader.
That's a really good
because
point.
Unfortunately they tend to know.
Yeah.
It's like the opposite of popcorn reading where you didn't have a chance to practice.
Oh,
so
gosh, I know.
You get all that anxiety, right? But this is like, I will do that tough one because I get to practice it and I will be ready.
I still see that sometimes. I know this isn't about popcorn reading.
No, it's okay. I was thinking we should just talk about it.
Say again, stop. Just stop. Please.
Yeah, okay, let's talk through why. Why?
Okay.
All you're going to do with popcorn reading, all you're going to make your students do is read the part repeatedly. Basically do exactly what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Until they have
any help.
No, right, exactly. They're going to count the paragraphs, read the part, make sure they could read it out loud so they're not
but they're doing it like under pressure.
Under pressure. It's the worst. It's the worst.
And what if they miscounted?
That's right.
Yeah, exactly. And then
you only have like 4 seconds, right? I mean, you might only have
a chance to like ask someone how to pronounce a word or any of that.
I usually found myself in the restroom by the time it was my turn.
That's right.
Avoidance.
Yeah. You're not alone.
Yeah, right? No kidding.
All right. I want to take us to one more part of that Rumpelstiltskin script. I know we took a little trip around the world here, but we're coming back to the script. I'm going to read one more part from it that I think we're going to look at sentence structure. So just kind of pay attention. This again is the narrator one, and we're going to focus on sentence structure here. By daybreak, the king was already there. And when he saw the gold, he was really astonished and delighted. But his heart became only more greedy. He had the miller's daughter taken into another room full of straw, which was much larger, and commanded her to spin that also in one night if she valued her life. The girl knew not how to help herself and was crying when the door opened again and the little man appeared and said. So all of that was
3 sentences.
3 sentences.
Conjunction junction.
That's right. What's your function?
Right.
Your function is to hold the whole story together, apparently.
Yeah, and I would imagine, I mean, you talked about this might happen on like the 3rd day or so that you're practicing, where you might point out to them those commas and how to pause and really work through that, because otherwise I could just see that not being read the way Lori just read it and just being read straight through.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Really hard to understand.
Well, what's crazy is like punctuation is one of the only visible prosodic cues in text. The rest is kind of modeled and learned and expressed based on meaning. But with punctuation, it tells you slight pause here, exclamation mark, question, lift your tone, that kind of thing. But so, yeah, that can be explicitly taught easily. And what great example.
That's why we chose it. We were like, we went through quite a few of your scripts to really choose some good ones here. So,
and then it feels not as daunting,
for both
right?
Of you.
Because if you break it down into like those chunks, right, then it feels like, okay, I can handle those chunks versus this really long sentence that could feel a little scary to read.
I mean, putting them on different lines with the commas, so you work on phrasing as well as that pausing.
I mean, I would have the kids be scooping, right? Like breaking it out, scooping, like circling. Oh, and. Oh, I see this word and over and over again. Yeah. I mean, and these are really helpful cues for them. Like, oh, comma, take a quick breath and go. There's a lot of cues that we can teach here.
And that's helping them for this particular script, but also for just reading in general, right? After they're done with this script, they're taking what they just learned from what you all just said to really complex texts.
Right? That's like the holy grail of teaching is transfer, when they start to use it in other places.
That's right. Oh, okay. So we could keep going all day. We won't, because we have limited time here. And I think we should really get to the research. So
all right.
you are a super cool researcher, and we know that you've shared that there's research to support readers theater. So you want to tell us about it?
Sure, absolutely. The wonderful thing about readers theater, it kind of was derived based on the fact that we learned that repeated readings and rehearsal transfers to other texts. Like repeatedly reading one text actually makes you better at another. So as soon as we found out that it didn't just make you good at one, we're like, this is amazing. This is wonderful. And that was in the 70s. We started to see a lot more repeated readings. And then, of course, we're like, okay, well, that's kind of boring. Let's add some authenticity. Why would anyone, repeatedly read something? Nowadays, you might have a script for a YouTube video and narrate over some sort of coyote walking around in the forest, whatever. Call centers, speeches, poetry recitations, and of course, actors. So here comes readers theater, and the research is vast because you know it, it covers a lot. Like we have research in gen ed, but we have research that supports it in special education classrooms. There was like 4 full classrooms that were involved in one of the studies that says that it worked with them. Emergent bilinguals have been studied. Title I classrooms have been studied. Readers theater has been studied in Taiwan. It's from kindergarten to post-secondary. Readers theater was actually recently used to help uh, pronunciation and learning English in Taiwan. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of crazy stuff out there, but I mean, it goes through the bulk of the research is in elementary. There's some really good research in middle school too. It's a little scant in high school, but then it comes back into college classrooms. So we did a study actually in a high school classroom using scripted stories or readers theater, and then we had a treatment versus control. The control essentially read the text and they answered the comprehension questions, and then the other group did it as a script. And that particular group, the readers theater treatment group, significantly outperformed the control on the reading comprehension. And that was really cool to see. So it's like, yeah, but that's kind of cheating. You have other support. I'm like, well, okay, well, what is the goal? Do you want your kids to understand the text, or is it to what it's not cheating, it's teaching.
Right.
It's providing support, it's providing a scaffold so that your students can understand the grade level expectation text. So it's pretty amazing. And in all of these different contexts and things, they've found that it significantly improves word recognition automaticity. It significantly improves prosody. It significantly improves reading comprehension. It significantly improves attitude toward reading. And in one study, it was kind of like, it was actually Poetry Academy. So they were performing poetry instead of scripts. They found that Lori Wilfong found that their overall attitude towards school had improved, just school in general.
Wow.
And that is certainly due to the fact that they are being successful, that they're actually succeeding and reading a grade level text and being good at it. Tim Brzezinski says that every kid should go home from school having read something successfully every day. And that's because, I mean, if I was terrible at something, I wouldn't go do it every single day. You don't see me on the basketball court. I'm awful at that. And I have the choice not to go. Okay. But these kids, they don't. They have to go to school and they have to spend 8 hours in different subjects, including, language arts, reading. And they're not good at it. And that's a problem. So that overall attitude starts to shift when they go to a place and they can excel and do what is expected. So that's, in general, the research that says it does a lot for a lot of things, a lot of different aspects of literacy.
I remember you telling
also,
us about the study that you did where the students didn't even think they made gains in reading because they were just like having too much fun.
Yeah.
They're like that wouldn't work. I was just having fun.
Yeah, I was just having a good time. Like we weren't doing reading. Well, that study was really cool. Actually, it was a big study, And then we kind of sliced it in different directions to look at different things. The overall study, we used the Gates-McGinnity reading test pre and post with a few hundred students, second graders, and who were participating in Reader's Theater, and then we had a control. And we so the three subtests are decoding, word knowledge, and reading comprehension. And when you look at the results, the reading, the decoding, and the reading and the word knowledge were pretty much the same in both groups, except one group was doing Reader's Theater and the other one was doing whatever it is that they were doing. And then in reading comprehension, the Reader's Theater group outperformed significantly the control group, and a lot of it is due to this active type participating in literacy, being involved in it, rather than this passive literacy of where we're just letting it hit us a little bit, but we're actually on the offensive, and that's cool. So some other results we found from that one is we started just looking at gender differences, and we saw that through an analysis that the boys had significantly outperformed the girls, or not significantly outperformed. They were significantly underperforming the girls, and all three areas: decoding, word knowledge, and comprehension. And in the treatment group, or in the control group, that gap remained from pre to post. The boys were doing much, were not performing as well. But in the Reader's Theater treatment, the gap was gone. And in some cases, they were outperforming, not significantly, but just descriptively. And it was so cool. Our research team was like, oh my gosh, we have found something to help boys, participate more in literacy. And it goes back to what you were saying, Melissa. We didn't know why it was happening. So I primarily do numbers. So I'm a quantitative researcher, but I was forced into qualitative because we had to figure out why. What was about Reader's Theater that engaged the boys so well. And we interviewed I don't know, it's like 100 boys and that participated in Reader's Theater. And the primary thing was it was a novel activity. They didn't see it as reading. We asked the kid, and it's like, does it make you a better reader? Why or why not? And he was like, no, because it's fun.
I can't.
But yet, when you look at his growth, it's like, you have made wonderful gains.
Yeah.
And, this one boy in particular that I was observing, oh my gosh, you could tell that he was just he would have been one of my favorites because he was a huge behavior problem. And he was dying to be the big bad wolf, like dying. He was on the floor, like begging. And I was like, please, teacher, give it to him. Please give it to him. And he was selected despite his being under the chair. But he did so amazing. And there's actually research out there conducted on Reader's Theater in classrooms that have students with behavioral concerns. So it is being used as like a warm-up activity in dyslexia small groups, and it's being used everywhere. And just seeing that behavioral concerns just kind of diminish because we're leveraging the fact that these kids are going to be loud. They're going to be boisterous. They're going to be moving. They're going to be, and that's what we want. That's absolutely what we want. These kids were made for it.
Yeah.
We give them that opportunity to, I couldn't sit down and read a book in my classroom when I was little. Well, typically my teacher just made me pass out papers. I don't know. I don't know why. But she loved me because I sat at her desk all the time. She loved me.
Imagine if you had Reader's Theater.
I know. It would have been phenomenal.
So pumped.
Would have just loved it. But, learning is too quiet sometimes, It doesn't always have to be crazy and wild, but it should be sometimes, and in order to reach all of the students. And even those that aren't, behavior concerns are still making gains too, in comprehension, in fluency, in attitude, motivation, confidence, all of these things. So, I mean,
And it's
it
very
may
structured
be
at the same time.
Yeah.
yes,
It's not it's not
It's not just
chaos. It's
chaos,
it's
yeah.
structured chaos.
Structured.
it is. Yeah, absolutely. We create a little boundary and we let the chaos ensue.
Correct.
We just,
Love that.
yeah, it's controlled chaos, and it's easy. Teachers, try it.
Yeah. If
Try it. If
anybody
you don't
needs
try it,
motivation, I'll share. I work with a student who was categorized as learning disabled, third grade student who was working on accuracy coming and I just was like, just bring her to my house. I will work with her. And we started doing readers theater and with grade level texts from your website, some other ones that I could find out there just based on her interests. And and then I added at some point I added some other informational texts, and we started doing some partner reading paragraph shrinking. But I implemented that partner reading routine with the readers theater scripts on grade level first. We got the routines. We had so much fun. And then we added on that layer of the paragraph shrinking too about 6 weeks in. So 6 weeks of readers theater and then 6 weeks additional of with the paragraph shrinking. And she went from 57 words per minute to 100 words per minute oral reading fluency in just like 3 months. And so this works. If you need to kind of think about that, that's huge. I know that's a one-on-one situation, but it was not a long time. It was maybe 15 minutes a day, 3 times a week at the most. So think about the power within a whole group of kids.
Yeah, and that's the wonderful thing about this small group activity. They're all doing the same thing, but they're working in small groups with different texts, and you are free to help them as needed. You meet with those groups every day, sit down, see where their struggles are, talk about the meaning. I mean, you're free to move amongst those groups. And if you identify a group that's really, really struggling, then yeah, you may want to find another time during the day to just work with them all the way through those struggles. Identify what their struggles are and try to remediate that so that they can have success on performance day.
For sure.
Yeah, I just have one more question about the research before we close this thing out. So you already mentioned it, but I just want to stamp it because I have heard a lot of skeptics of readers theater who mention that, well, they just get better at that script or, that whatever it is they're reading. And I think the same goes for repeated readings. Like they just get better at what they're reading, but that doesn't translate. You've already given many examples of where it does actually translate to other texts, but I'm just wondering if a teacher's hearing that from their principal or from another teacher, or it's like, how would you say they should handle that situation?
Sure.
Or give them some more ammunition?
I think they should print out J. Samuel's article published in the Reading Teacher in 1979 called The Method of Repeated Readings, which is where it is visually, graphically represented of how the transfer works. For example, there's a graph, and it shows a kid who their words correct per minute as it increased throughout repeated readings and how their errors decreased. And then the next line is actually that same kid reading a more challenging text, and you can see the words correct per minute starts higher and the errors start lower. And they do this again and again, and the same phenomenon occurs. Therefore, the repeated reading itself is helping them learn how to read. It's helping develop their fluency on other texts as well. Fluency in general, they're building their fluency. You can't, think about it. Like, so I haven't read a text. Let's just say I haven't read this My Quotable Kid book, right? That's sitting on this table. Am I going to have to practice it? No, I'm a fluent reader. I am now fluent. I am fluent at almost any text you put in front of me. Not the New England Journal of Medicine, but I certainly there is that transfer effect. It's practice. It's practicing a trumpet, practicing driving, practicing cartwheels. You get better at it. In general, you can do a cartwheel outside, inside, on a trampoline. You don't have to repeatedly practice on the trampoline, then repeatedly practice on the floor.
Maybe a balance beam will be tough. That would be the New
there are some
England
situations.
Journal
That's
of Medicine.
Like the Journal of Medicine
Right.
of cartwheels right there. But I would take a look at that and show them that we've known this for a very long time. And in general, when we look at the research specifically on Reader's Theater, there's a lot of really solid work in that area with rigorous methods, with reliable results that say, hey, we controlled for this, we controlled for this. I mean, our study used something called propensity score matching, where it's acceptable by the What Works Clearinghouse as a method to determine effectiveness of instructional strategies. And it essentially matches treatment and control groups. A person in this group, you have a male that's in special education who is Title I, Hispanic, and scored this on the pretest. And it matches that to somebody in the control. And if there's no match, it eliminates them. So it's our best attempt to mimic randomization and also make sure that we have apples to apples. So there's a lot of solid research out there that says it works. It's not just people going, wow, my kids really liked it. And that's lovely, but where I focus is impact, student impact on what are the outcomes. And when you see things working, then do it, especially something that's only 5 minutes. And then here's more ammunition for those teachers. Say, you know what? Research is saying it's working in all of these different contexts. I'd like to at least test it out in my classroom. I will do pre, post, and I will progress monitor it with, curriculum-based measurement or DIBELS or whatever that you happen to use. And then I'll come back to you in 6 weeks. I would say give it 6 weeks and just see what the results are. Show that principle. And if it's not working for them, great. Do something else. Maybe it's just that class, but I mean, so I would recommend doing an experiment on your own and give it the time. Make sure you fidelity, structure, support, challenging texts. Again, they're probably not going to grow if you're going to be choosing, cat in the hat for your fifth graders. But so, with all of those elements in place, I just can't imagine you not seeing growth. And another thing that Reader's Theater does is it has inherent accountability. Like, it may be the only time that they're actually reading something that day. I was really good at avoiding reading in school. I could make up beautiful responses. I just pick one sentence out and just make a wonderful personal connection and just fool that teacher where they're like in tears from my reflection. And I didn't read a single thing, but with Reader's Theater, they have to.
Yeah. I love the sports analogies. I think that's really helpful for listeners too, like thinking about, okay, if we teach someone to swim in a pool, that transfers to many other bodies of water. You're not going to not know how to swim. Correct. When you get to those things, you're not going to be like, oh gosh, this doesn't have chlorine in it, so I'm not going to be able to swim. You're going to be able to swim in the other bodies of water, whatever they might be. There might be different challenges. There might be some waves. There might be, I don't know,
Sharks.
Some mucky things. I don't even like to think about it, but
jellyfish.
Right. But you still know how to swim. So
Or
you can still use
bottom.
what you know. Oh, I know. So gross. I agree with you. But yeah, I mean, you still know how to swim and you can still apply those skills that you have. You don't lose them. I think the thing that I think about is like, that's where the role of the teacher is so important, because that is where the teacher can help make that practice really, really good practice, right? It needs to be accurate. We know that. You said that was the first step. We know that they need to be reading with expression to be able to show that they understand it. So that's where like that teacher special stuff comes in, and you're teaching that script so that then they can apply it. Because if I'm doing a freestyle stroke and I'm just doing it and I don't know how to turn my head to get air appropriately, then in another body of water, I'm going to probably struggle with that skill.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to make sure, exactly. It doesn't matter where. So we have to make sure those things are firmed up in the original place so that we can then go transfer them. And I like to think of it like perfect practice makes perfect. I don't always love the idea of perfection, but I think that in terms of practice, if we're teaching freestyle incorrectly in a pool, it's not going to be done well anywhere else either. So, same with your basketball. If you're not taught correctly how to do a layup, you're just not going to be able to do it. Doesn't matter the hoop, So perfect practice makes perfect. That's where the teacher comes in to make sure that the students are doing it to their very best and doing it with that accuracy and with that fluent reading that they need to be doing so that they can transfer it.
Right. And that's a common misconception too, as far as like readers who are like, well, they try it and they're like, well, they're out there and they're not doing very well. Well, you're very much involved in it. It doesn't make it successful because they can do it on their own. They're not going to be able to do it on their own.
Right.
That's why you're there. So, don't expect them to just naturally fall into these groups and work through the five, steps or whatever and be successful.
I would even say if you're a teacher listening and you're like, you're starting this out, structure your groups. Put a kid who is going to be like the bossy teacher in each group, right? So that you have a presence
whoa,
from the get-go.
We like to call them emergent
leaders. I'm sorry. You are so right. We will edit that out, Chase.
No, keep it. Oh, man.
But you know what I mean, right?
I do. Yeah, absolutely. You can structure your groups. Maybe it's not the first while based on interest. Maybe it is who's going to work well together.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So many great tips today. We can't even thank you enough. Is there anything that you haven't said, want to say, been dying to get out there about Readers Theater, and this is your time?
It's easy and it's effective, and your kids will enjoy it. So do it.
I think you just titled your episode Easy, Enjoyable, Effective.
There it is.
Just do it.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
And your website again is thebestclass.org, correct?
Yes. And you'll see the scripts on there. They're in alphabetical order. And the little parentheses is the number of parts. That way you don't have to click on each script to figure out, I need one for 6. I need one for 6. You can just Control F, put in 6 and see which one you might want to use.
Yeah. I recommended it recently to a mom who's working on a mom friend, and I was teaching her how to do teach Readers Theater and teach this like protocol with her little guy for the summer. And she said, I went through, I found all the ones with the least amount of parts because it's just us or just our family. And I printed all the fart ones. And I was like, great. She's like, farts, boogers, they're all printed.
The booger.
Yeah, the boogers.
Personally, well, my wife and I co-wrote it.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. So, I mean, going to good use all over the world. Thank you.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for having me. You guys are awesome. Love how you get the word out.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks
this
for
is
joining
great.
us again.
Absolutely.